Hi, I am Lauren Dickerson, and this is my presentation on Chapter 24 from American Yacht, where we covered U.S. history as it related to the era of World War II. World War II did not start all at once. It was something that kind of built and grew gradually. It started with Germany absolutely disregarding all previous agreements from World War I and increasing their military forces and their efforts in expansion. They felt it under Hitler that it was a right to their nation to be able to expand and have a strong military. They did not agree with the treaty that they had signed. Italy had already been under a dictator fascist leadership with Mussolini that had started sometime in the 1920s and grew to popularity, and they grew in forces. They ended up joining the military forces of the German country and also increasing their footprint in Europe by invading other nations. While this was going on, Japan also decided to start looking to expand. They invaded into China, they expanded into China, and they did so in a way that was absolutely devastating to the population there. They committed atrocity after atrocity, killing civilians, and just disregarding human rights altogether. This sparked some debate in the United States, which had, up until a certain point, decided that they didn't want to have any involvement in any war efforts overseas. They were fatigued after the First World War and felt that efforts were better concentrated at home. We were still trying to recover from the collapse of the economy in the Great Depression. This all shifted with the with the event of the attack on Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and provoked the United States into joining into World War II. Congress took just a few hours to decide to agree to send us to war, which changed the landscape to the country altogether. A lot of factories that had been used previously to make things like appliances and automobiles had been retrofitted and changed so that they could produce items needed for the war efforts. This created jobs and all but ended unemployment in the United States. Women returned to the workforce. African Americans and other immigrants started to work. The Mexican population was utilized and brought back into the country after previously being shunned and shut out. As American men were sent overseas to fight in the war efforts, women entered into jobs that they previously had not been in. They were hired at still a lower wage, and they were not able to keep those jobs after the men returned. They were either pushed out or forced, to just step away and give the jobs back to the men. But they did at the time get many jobs in administration, factory work, and they were also deployed overseas. About, I think it was 350,000 women joined the Women's Army Corps and helped in the war efforts. African American women were also part of that demographic. However, they saw racism still in issues with Jim Crow laws and segregation. So they were equally, disadvantaged, or they were even more disadvantaged than white women, their counterparts. So immigrants they saw different levels of racism, degrees of racism. The Japanese Americans saw really terrible levels of racism after Pearl Harbor. There was a lot of fear of the Japanese, which resulted in an executive order allowing them to be removed from their homes and put in internment camps. One of the letters that we covered that experience by one of the Japanese Americans that went through that, and the shift in the cultural image of the Japanese Americans, the way they were treated, was very sudden after Pearl Harbor. Once America joined in the war efforts, it shifted the tides. It didn't happen right away, but it did take some time, but it did help the Allies in order to overtake German efforts, or German forces. they won victory against the Germans and Hitler died, and we had VE Day. This did not completely end the fighting. However, the war in the Pacific continued, and the Japanese continued to fight mercilessly. Many civilians died, and the United States decided to deploy 2 atomic bombs for the first time in world history. It was devastating to the Japanese population, but it was felt that it was needed in order to bring the war to a close and to save, many, many lives from dying needlessly in this war that was continuing. They surrendered, and, forces were sent home. The men came back, took their jobs back. Women and immigrants were forced out of them. The president at the time, during the commencement of the war, leading up to the war, commencement of the war, during the war, Roosevelt passed away, and Harry S. Truman stepped into the presidency. The United States was considered a superpower following the World War. The Soviet Union was as well. They believed that this was the catalyst for what caused the start of the Cold War. And that is my summary of the chapter 24 on World War II and American Yawp. Thank you very much.